I was a child, the age of 5, I believe, and one afternoon I was either playing with my Hot Wheels or coloring. I think I was coloring, and I was laying on my stomach in the living room, just doodling away. And there was that moment where my dad comes in, I hear him come in, and his shoes enter my line of sight, and plops this down in front of me. This is Spidey Super Stories, issue 27. Now this is 35 cents. And he must have noticed that I watched a lot of superhero cartoons, and I watched the Electric Company pretty religiously. And this was connected to the Electric Company. It featured 3 short stories of Spider-Man, and the middle one would often include characters from the Electric Company, because Spider-Man during the 70s had a segment on the Electric Company where he would fight villains that used bad grammar or something like that. I don't remember. And I remember the costume looked really good too. It actually looked better than the Nicholas Hammond CBS Spider-Man TV series. Although, to be honest, I wasn't complaining. You know, Spider-Man was Spider-Man to me at the time. I loved this comic. As you can probably tell if you look closely, it's rather beaten up on the sides. I carried this with me all the time. I read it over and over again. I loved it. And of course, that really started me going in my full-fledged love of comic books. I, of course, went over to Batman, Justice League, all the other Marvel characters. But of course, Spider-Man was my main gun, especially at that time. There was just something about him that just seemed so natural to me. Even as a child, I did find him somewhat relatable. And I did tend to notice very quickly that as opposed to the animated series and the live-action series, there was this angst in this character. I just started reading the regular books not too long after Gwen Stacy had died. There had been mentions of her and Uncle Ben, which I found really interesting. So, I mean, that really kind of just got to me. And he's a character that I think he's probably maybe Stan Lee's most ingenious creation, because he's such a natural fit for so many people, either male or female, frankly. And it just feels so personal. His relationships, his struggles, it just always seems to really grab you in the way that it doesn't for other characters. So, of course, he was my big favorite. Now, years went by, and I stopped reading comic books until about around the age of 17. I noticed he had a black costume, which blew my mind. I can't believe he was wearing a black costume. It looked great. And he was just getting married to Mary Jane, who is actually in this comic as well. Which, it's the first story. So the first story I ever read of Spider-Man, she was in there too. So that I found rather exciting. I was about around late teens, of course, dating women as much as I could. And the idea of Spider-Man getting married, I thought was a really exciting idea. And a natural one, too. There's always been kind of a progression in Spider-Man's life. And I think that was something Stan Lee kind of started at the get-go. I mean, he, after a few years, graduated high school. About around the late 60s or early 70s. It took Dick Grayson like 30 years to graduate high school. That dumbass. But, and he also went to college. He even moved out of his elderly aunt's house. He grew up. We watched him grow up. And getting married, I always felt, was a natural progression. Now, years later, there comes a story called One More Day. Now, it's written by J. Michael Straczynski, and Joe Quesada, editor-in-chief of Marvel, did the penciling himself. Now, I have to admit, the the way it's written, constructed, and the art is obviously far superior to the old Spidey Super stories. But of course, I don't really. I had problems with it. First off, there was this idea, and actually, there had been this declining feeling in Spider-Man. The sales have been going down since probably the 90s, which is why they probably tried that whole clone crap a few years ago, where they tried to reboot the character, and obviously it didn't work. Because because fans don't seem to like being told that what they had been following for 20 years, basically a generation, was false. I think that's tend to bug people. So Marvel had to step back and just put everything back the way it was. The problem is, Marvel seemed to have this feeling, actually, that there was something wrong with the character. Compared to, like, maybe my other favorite character, Batman. Batman has had a number of stories, just this past decade, that could be considered as great works. Just even the current run that Grant Morrison is doing in the Batman books, Batman and Robin and Batman Incorporated, of course the regular Batman title. But Spider-Man doesn't have that many stories that people can go, oh yes, this is fantastic, this is great work, this is art. And I think Marvel knows that, and I think the fans know it, but nobody seems to know what to do. And I think One More Day was an effort to do something about it. It's a reboot, obviously, and most of you know what exactly happened in this story, where after Spider-Man had revealed his secret identity in the Civil War story, and went on the run after quitting Tony Stark's program, he, Mary Jane, and Aunt May basically were fugitives from the law and from his enemies at the same time, with no protection from the government that the whole program had provided. And during that story, Aunt May is shot, and Peter is doing his best to see if he could save her, and of course Mephisto, the devil, comes to him and tells him that he can save her. He can, if, let's see, how should I put this? Basically, he sacrifices, like, everything he had before, he got married, and essentially everything is reversed, and the series starts over with Brand New Day, with as if everyone had forgotten. And the idea was that, yeah, you still have those stories, they still exist, but nobody remembers them anymore. Everybody forgot. It's almost like Spider-Man had his own personal Crisis of Infinite Earths in the middle of the Marvel Universe. So Peter and Mary Jane forgot they were married. Quite a few things that happened over the years with Spider-Man, namely, of course, his secret identity getting revealed, but also the organic web shooters that had been added. Just a whole bunch of other stuff is just gone, and for some reason Harry Osborn came back to life. I haven't bothered reading since then, so I don't know what explanation has come of that. However, something really bothers me about it, and I think it has to do with the fact that Peter Parker made a deal with the devil. Now, there's a couple of things that are huge about Spider-Man that has always affected me personally and most other fans, is the fact that, yes, he's an average hero, he's an average man, it's somebody you could relate to, and also his incredible sense of responsibility. Now, I can understand caving in and giving in to this deal, but it really doesn't fall into the responsible part. Now, I had always thought, I was hoping that the story would kind of end with him doing the right thing and not making the deal with the devil, like still keeping with his sense of responsibility, knowing he did the right thing, but still feeling guilty about it, and almost feeling like he killed Aunt May. But of course, that's not what they did. I believe Joe Quesada has mentioned this, and I know other fans have felt this way, that the marriage was actually the problem with the Spider-Man titles. And that's not true. I'm just going to say that flat out. It's not, I don't think. It's not true. The marriage was, from my point of view, I think the marriage was often poorly written, where Mary Jane was a intriguing character. She was kind of on the surface. She gave everyone the idea that she had no troubles in the world. She was a fairly party girl. She was always quick with a joke, and sleeping around and being party crazy girl. But on the inside, she was kind of a sensitive person with her own kind of problems and hang-ups, and a lot like Peter Parker in a way, where she had her own secret identity. Which is how they related, because that's basically how Peter Parker is. He's this wisecracking, heroic, crazy guy in the costume, and then he's kind of a sensitive, quiet kid outside of that costume. So that's why they kind of like hooked up, and I don't know when it happened. I don't know when Mary Jane went from that kind of character to the doting wife, and I feel like it happened sometime very early on, maybe during the David Michelinie tenure on the book, where Tom McFarlane and then Eric Larson was writing, drawing, excuse me. I don't know when that happened, but I think that's probably the general point, where she became almost a replacement for Aunt May, who was the doting, worried mother figure. Now she was replaced by the doting, worried wife figure, and that's not as fun to read, frankly. And I think a great disservice was done to not just Mary Jane, but the whole title. That's something that can be easily fixed. I mean, that's not something that needs some kind of cosmic shakeup. It just needs good writing. It just needs writers to not depend on stereotypes, because stereotypes are easy and lazy. And it takes a writer to actually dig a little bit deeper. And some very good writers have come through the Spider-Man titles, and I don't know why. It just seems to have been done like this. Mary Jane should have been written as more of a partner, almost an Alfred kind of character, in a way, serving that kind of role as, the cohort that isn't a superhero, but helps the hero a lot, and except, in this case would be the wife. Now, I understand what Joe Quesada was thinking, and, he's obviously an old school fan who just can't, let go of old school in this case. And he is the editor, well actually, I think he's leaving soon, but of course at the time he was the editor-in-chief of Marvel, so therefore, hey, it's his right to do what he wishes on what he thinks is best. The problem is, if you want to get rid of the marriage, get them divorced. Now, I've heard the excuse like, oh, we can't have them divorced. That's not relatable. We can't have her die. He's going to be either a divorced guy or a widower. That's not something we can relate to. He's Spider-Man. He's fought gods. He's been killed and come back. He's gone to different worlds. He's married to a model. And when he's not married to a model, he dates like sexy, beautiful thieves. There's got to be a point where you go, well, it's superhero stuff. And you know what? I'm sorry, but that is relatable. That's more relatable than any of the stuff that Spider-Man usually goes through. I know people personally who are in their early 20s. I'm guessing Spider-Man's probably 25 at most. I know people younger than 25 who are divorced with kids. Or, hey, are widows or widowers because, that Iraq war we had for a while. People can relate to that stuff. And the fact that that is said by not just the Marvel staff who believed in doing this, but also fans who support the idea. You're not thinking in real-world terms, the way you're pretending you do, by saying stuff like, oh, I can't relate to a character who's married to a supermodel. Well, then, you know what? Then you can't have the devil magically wish away the marriage. You can't, like, have it both ways. I'm sorry. So now we have Brand New Day, which I've been told has been finished up. But, you know, nothing has been undone about it. I don't want to read Spider-Man anymore. People tell me from time to time, oh, it's really good, but you know what? There's something that's been kind of tainted by this whole thing. Maybe it's Marvel just copping to the fact that, hey, this is fictional. Why are you even worried about it? Why do you even get upset? Why do you even care about the problems in Peter Parker? It's just fictional. You could just change everything like that. Who cares? I care. Anyway, this comic, I don't know how much, this was 35 cents, and it's kind of beaten up. It doesn't feature anything incredible in it. It's just my first comic book ever, and to me, this will always be priceless. Now, this comic is Amazing Spider-Man 544. It's the first issue of One More Day. It's jokingly referred to as still only $3.99. I don't know what the market value price of this comic is right now. I'm sure it's maybe a few bucks over. It is the first part of that storyline. But to me, what is it worth? That's what it's worth. Push the button, Lindsay.